The Red Ribbon Army was one of Goku's most fierce enemies during his childhood. Even after he defeated them, their legacy would come back to haunt him many years later. Today we embark on a new task. On this edition of Dragon Ball In Depth, I present to you the full history of the Red Ribbon Army from conception to reality, and unearth secrets and details from behind the scenes that have never been discussed here on YouTube by anybody until today, which stems from years and years of research. All this and more next. The Red Ribbon Army were a huge threat to Goku and the entire world. The arc began in Dragon Ball manga chapter 55. Anime-wise, they debuted in Dragon Ball episode 30. The idea behind the Red Ribbon Army has been debated for quite some time, but you're going to get the answer from me today. In Japanese, they're referred to as the Reddo Ribbon Gun, and the gun means army. It is rumored that Toriyama borrowed this concept from Toei's smash tokusatsu hit 1971's Kamen Rider, who featured an army of villains similar to the Red Ribbon. In addition to that, it's assumed by fans that he borrowed concepts from 1966's Django, 1983's Shaolin Princess, and a plethora of war movies. The characters in the army themselves are based on numerous film characters from Western cinema, but more on that later. The individual members of the army are all named after various colors like red, yellow, blue, white, etc., which is sort of Toriyama's callback to how the characters were named in the James Bond fictional universe for the fictional villainous organization of Spectre. In that story, they're all named after numbers, like number 1, number 2. Toriyama instead chooses to use colors. And keep in mind that James Bond movies were a massive influence to Toriyama during the time he was writing all this. They can be identified by the RR logo on their clothing. We don't know if these are code names or birth names, although it seems like they are code names, and we also don't know the in-universe origin of the army itself. When I was much younger, I was told, or maybe I read somewhere on the internet, that the Red Ribbon Army was inspired by Mega Man, aka Rockman on NES, and that Toriyama played that game and loved it and wanted to incorporate the various colors Mega Man has when he switches weapons. However, I have not, as of this video, been able to find confirmation of that, so it could be made up. It's pretty simple to figure out that the Red Ribbon Army is a satire that is poking fun at various armies during World War II, such as the Soviets, the Nazis, and has a few direct references to them, but really played up for laughs, and each member has his own unique situation involving Goku. They are a totalitarian army, not loyal to any country, who is hell-bent on world domination, or so it seems, as well as retrieving the 7 Dragon Balls to make a wish. As I mentioned before, if you are a fan of James Bond, good news, so is Akira Toriyama, a huge fan. James Bond-inspired weapons and characters dominate this arc. The Red Ribbon Army feels more like a hybrid of Spectre from the Bond films and the Three Stooges. Unlike some of Goku's future foes, the Red Ribbon Army is mostly grounded in reality. They're all just normal people or anthropomorphic animals, and very few are superpowered. Goku has to face off against large numbers in this arc, not just one strong opponent. While Pilaf may have been the first antagonist of the Dragon Ball series, the Red Ribbon were the first real threat. The Red Ribbon Army command various vehicles such as tanks, planes, and other such vehicles, some of which are based on actual real-world weapons, while others are purely rooted in science fiction. The Red Ribbon Army is known worldwide in-universe, so there are no secrets here. And although we don't know much about their formation and their past, as Toriyama never delves into this, people from all over the world know they exist. This arc is fun because it has not only traditional martial arts action, but also finds Goku destroying so many vehicles and buildings that it's just a blast to watch. Now, let's talk about the characters in the army because there's quite a few and each have their own unique story and inspiration. We'll start at the bottom and work our way up. When it comes to the beginning of the Red Ribbon Army saga, the manga and anime versions start very differently. The first Red Ribbon agent that Goku confronts is Colonel Silver, and that's an anime-only segment featuring Pilaf as the series transitions to its new antagonistic force. Colonel Silver has a much larger role in the anime compared to the manga. When compared to some of the wackier characters, Colonel Silver is relatively reserved, quiet, and focused. In the early part of the arc, anime only, the army is storming through various houses, searching for the Dragon Balls. There's an awesome scene where Silver takes on 4 professional boxers that I love. What a great scene. But he has no chance against Goku, who knocks him out and takes his bag with the Dragon Ball. When it comes to his fate, it's also very different. In the manga, Red Ribbon Army leader Commander Red says he was going to be executed for his failure, but that scene is never shown. In the anime, Silver returns to the Red Ribbon Army base and begs for another chance, but Commander Red orders his guards to remove him. He and the guards leave and we never see him again. So it's unknown if he escaped or was killed, but I assume he did not survive. There's a few Red Ribbon Army members that are mentioned but never actually shown in either the anime or the manga. One is Brown, who appears to command troops, but to this day we're never shown the Brown Squadron. The other is General Copper, who's never shown whatsoever in the series. All we know about him is that he appeared to be of a higher rank than Silver or Brown. Another anime-only character is the Master Thief known as Husky. This blonde bombshell never appears in the manga, but it seems like she may have been inspired by the blonde version of Launch, who was also a thief. However, I believe other aspects of her character were borrowed from a one-shot Toriyama manga called Pink. The most memorable thing about this character is that after she stole a Dragon Ball from Goku, he tickled her in order to get it back. We never truly found out her fate either. I don't know when I'll ever talk about her again, to be honest. So even though she's not an actual member of the Red Ribbon Army, she's a hired thief, I chose to include her in here because, like I said, I don't know when I'll ever talk about her again. Then there's Colonel Violet. In the manga, she only appears in a couple of panels, but in the anime, there's tons more development. Unlike many of the other Red Ribbon leaders, she doesn't really care that much about the aspirations and goals of the army. She just wants money, and lots of it. This is illustrated best during the final 4 episodes of this arc in the anime. As Goku is storming the Red Ribbon Army headquarters, instead of fighting against him, she chooses to break open the army safe and steal all of their surplus money. I mean, she completely freaking jacked it. She's probably one of the few members to survive, and it's likely she gave up on any kind of totalitarianism and instead probably lived off the army's riches for the rest of her life. I don't think we ever see her again. One interesting tidbit is that in the Path to Power movie, she is killed by Goku, and to this day, she's the only female character in any Dragon Ball movie to be taken out by Goku. We'll talk more about that movie a little bit later on. Her appearance is interesting because she looks a lot like Ranfan, who appeared in the previous arc, the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai, but like Husky was a slightly altered Launch, this could be what was done here with Violet. Once Goku defeated Silver in the anime, he would move on to his first real run-in with a top-ranked leader in the Red Ribbon Army, and that would be in Muscle Tower, which we'll talk about next. Beneath Commander Red, the next major leader in the Red Ribbon Army hierarchy is General White, or White Shogun. He is the lead villain of the Muscle Tower portion of the Red Ribbon Army saga, residing at the very top of the tower like a true final boss. The inspiration behind Muscle Tower is clearly taken from the pagoda in Bruce Lee's Game of Death. Not only is Toriyama a massive Bruce Lee fan, but so is Japan itself, as we see this theme over and over again. In the classic NES game Kung Fu, aka Spartan X, we see the pagoda. More recently, Final Fantasy VII, the PS1 version, has a side quest with Yuffie where you try to beat 5 levels of a pagoda. The idea of beating different levels with a boss at the end started with Game of Death, and Toriyama uses it here. How many video games throughout history have done this? Toriyama himself admits in interviews that Muscle Tower was inspired by Spartan X, which was inspired by Bruce Lee. It all goes back to that. Within the tower, Goku battles various obstacles on his way to the top, mostly consisting of characters that provided different challenges for him. We are introduced to a character named Sergeant Metallic, whom you may know from the English dub as Major Metallitron. He is the first of many cybernetic organisms introduced in Dragon Ball, and as you know, cyborgs, aka androids, aka artificial humans, become synonymous with the Red Ribbon Army later on in the story, but I'll go way deeper into that in the future. Metallic is obviously based on the lead character from James Cameron's 1984 film The Terminator, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. The sunglasses and spiky hair give it away, plus he's mechanical under his skin. Toriyama loves James Cameron. Later on in Dragon Ball Z, Toriyama would revisit Cameron's ideas from Terminator 2, so this is a bit of a precursor to that. One interesting aspect about this part of the series is that it's the first time that Goku is hinted at being an alien, not of this Earth, through the cyborg scanner. We know Toriyama didn't plan for Goku to become an alien until much later in the story when it was revealed, but it's funny that he may have danced around with the idea as early as the Red Ribbon arc in the manga, many years before his brother would come from space and tell him the truth about his heritage. The next challenge would come from Master Sergeant Murasaki the Ninja. The name Murasaki is Japanese for the color purple, so he still matches the color code naming scheme of the Red Ribbon staff. Murasaki was modeled after actor Nakadai Tatsuya from Akira Kurosawa's classic film Yojimbo. There were ninjas in the James Bond movie You Only Live Twice, which I mentioned because it's as clear as day that Toriyama was watching Bond films around this time. And obviously Kurosawa films are legendary all over the world, especially in Japan. Goku's battle with Murasaki is both fun and exciting, with tons of slapstick humor, which is the style Dragon Ball was going with at the time. I've said this before, but you gotta watch Jackie Chan's Drunken Master to get a feel for where Toriyama got this tone from. This is the only time in the series that we see people playing hide and seek, ladies and gentlemen. It's that awesome. Here's a fun fact. Murasaki appears alongside Son Goku in the 1997 Dr. Slump reboot anime for a few episodes. During the Murasaki part of the story, we are introduced to Hachan, aka Android 8 or 8er. I'll be going into detail on this character in the next edition of Dragon Ball In Depth, the sequel to this video, Androids Explained, so look forward to that. We are then introduced to the blob monster known as Bouillon, and the key word there is the blob because this character is inspired by 1958's film The Blob. Yes, Bouillon does resemble Majin Buu a bit, and perhaps Toriyama felt like borrowing that concept again later on for Buu, but this was the original pink blob monster. Bouillon's name is a pun on the Japanese term buyo buyo, which means soft and fluffy. This would be Goku's final challenge until facing General White. The gun that General White uses was the same one used by Knick Knack in The Man with the Golden Gun, the Bond film from 1974. There's even a scene here where White takes a hostage that was inspired by Jackie Chan's Police Story. I mentioned how much Toriyama loves Bond movies and James Cameron and Bruce Lee, and of course, Jackie Chan too. He loves his movies. After Muscle Tower, we are introduced to Blue Shogun, aka General Blue, who would become the next major villain of the Red Ribbon Army arc to take center stage, and boy, is he a controversial character. On the surface, General Blue is a stereotype of what many would call an ideal German Nazi soldier. He's tall and in shape and has blonde hair and blue eyes. Adolf Hitler believed that these non-Jewish Aryans were biologically superior men. But who is General Blue actually modeled after? German actor Kai Wolf is literally him. And not just that, but Wolf is known for playing Nazis in films, including the 1983 Twilight Zone movie. Remember, the Nazis regime doesn't actually exist in the world of Dragon Ball, so the Red Ribbon Army just takes aspects of Nazis and Soviets and combines them. And yes, even though Adolf Hitler was parodied in Dragon Ball Z Movie 12, note that he does not wear the Nazi symbol. Instead of wearing a swastika, Blue has an armband that just says Blue on it. Toriyama writes this character very feminine in the manga, and Toshio Furukawa, the same actor who would later portray Piccolo, also mimics that idea with the way he speaks. And speaking of Nazis, one of Blue's top agents, who doesn't have a name in the manga but in the anime is named Doc, or Dark, closely resembles Heinrich Himmler, leader of the Nazi SS. Now, Blue being a Nazi is only part of the controversy. The big punchline from Toriyama is revealed when Bulma realizes that he is homosexual. She even refers to him as an okama, which is a Japanese slang offensive slur for gay men, sort of like the slang word in English that begins with the letter F. You know what I'm talking about. The idea here is that we're supposed to be surprised and laugh at the fact that the Red Ribbon, which is inspired by the Nazi Party who believed that gays were unclean people, would have someone like this in their ranks. That's the irony of the story here. Kudiden realizes that somebody of Blue's persuasion would likely not be in the Red Ribbon Army, which means that, like the real-life Nazis, they are very intolerant to that. However, there is an exception, and it may be where Toriyama got the idea from. Ernst Röhm was a Nazi leader who was openly gay. This, along with the appearance of Staff Officer Black, is some of the more controversial aspects of Dragon Ball. Obviously, this was written in the 1980s, in a time when even American cinema often used gay jokes as humor. It seemed a bit more normal to see this kind of stuff, which would really not fly in the more socially conscious era that we live in now. Oh, but it gets a bit worse than that. So in the anime version of this arc, not the manga, the anime, there is a scene where Toei sort of went a bit too far. Dragon Ball Episode 56, original Japanese version. When Blue and Goku go to Penguin Village for the Dr. Slump crossover, it is implied that Blue is romantically aroused by Obochaman, who is a robot but resembles a prepubescent boy. This reinforces a very bad stereotype about gays, but I want to remind you this was Toei's idea, not Toriyama's, because it was added to the anime. Many international dub scripts, including the English dub, have altered Blue's lines to change the context. Be that as it may, whichever Toei writer thought this was funny may have actually angered a large number of people. Besides that, Blue is the first real martial artist that Goku faces off against with advanced knowledge of ki. He has a paralysis technique and telekinetic powers. Ultimately, Blue is defeated by Arale during the Penguin Village crossover, who at this point was way stronger than Goku. After Blue failed in his mission, the Red Ribbon Army brought in a special assassin known as Tao Pai Pai, aka Mercenary Tao. he would die at the hands of Tao Pai Pai and his tongue. When it comes to Tao Pai Pai, he is a very important portion of this story arc, but many years ago, I released an episode of Dragon Ball In Depth that I put out August 28th, 2016. So be sure to watch that video for complete details on the history of Tao Pai Pai. In the next section, we're going to talk about the top ranking brass in the Red Ribbon Army and ultimately their fates. After Blue, the next Red Ribbon Army member we would be introduced to is Colonel Yellow. He more closely resembles a World War I pilot, and I love how deep a cut this is from Toriyama. This character is a satire inspired by a John Wayne war film called The Flying Tigers from 1942. And this character is a literal anthropomorphic tiger with yellow fur who is also a pilot. It's perfect. Interestingly enough, in Journey to the West, the folk tale that inspired Dragon Ball initially, there were numerous battles between Sun Wukong and tiger demons. Goku defeats this tiger with a single punch. After Tao Pai Pai was defeated, Goku decided enough was enough and that it was time to storm the Red Ribbon Army headquarters and put an end to the Empire once and for all. Goku does not hesitate to massacre hundreds upon hundreds of soldiers while the rest escaped, many of them giving up their loyalty to the army. If we go to the top of the mountain, we have the leader of the group, Commander Red. There's been some confusion about this due to inaccurate dub changes, but make no mistake, Commander Red is the unquestionable leader of the army, and we do not have a historical record of anybody who came before him. Visually, Red appears to be a combination of real-life Soviet ruler Joseph Stalin and fictional Bond villain Emilio Largo, but that's only the beginning of the tie-ins to James Bond. Personality-wise, Red borrows a lot from the leader of Spectre, Blofeld. Blofeld has inspired many other characters in fiction, including Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget. He sits in a chair, strokes his cat, smokes a cigar, and plots his takeover. When it comes to the Red Ribbon Army main headquarters, aspects of it were directly taken from the James Bond film You Only Live Twice. Red's obsession with finding the Dragon Balls may have been inspired by Hitler's supposed obsession with finding sacred occult objects, such as the Ark of the Covenant portrayed in the 1981 film Raiders of the Lost Ark. Red's assistant is known by the fandom as Staff Officer Black or Assistant Black. There has been some controversy throughout the years on how Toriyama chooses to draw the specific features of characters that resemble real-life African Americans, but in a quite controversial way. We're going to go back to that here in just a moment. The way Black is portrayed, as far as his personality goes, is fiercely loyal to the cause. A Red Ribbon diehard who seeks the same ambitions as Red, that is, until the very end of the arc, where he finds out Red's true motivations. Toriyama chose to save one of the biggest twists in the arc for the very end. This entire time, we as an audience, as well as the members of the Red Ribbon Army in-universe, were led to believe that Commander Red's goals for gathering the Dragon Balls was to wish for world domination or at least something that would assist the army. But no, it's revealed at the very end that Toriyama chose to subvert our expectations in a comedic way and reveal that Red's ambition is to grow taller because he's so short and was bullied so much in school for being short that he has a Napoleon complex, which was a funny joke and one that Toriyama would reuse with Frieza in Dragon Ball Super Broly. Assistant Black, being much more practical minded, realizes that this entire quest has cost them the lives of hundreds of soldiers and possibly a hell of a lot of money in infrastructure and weapons, and he's in absolute shock. He snaps, and just like that, bang. At this point, Black assumed control of the Red Ribbon Army and renamed it the Black Ribbon Army, and renames himself Commander Black. He would end up being the true final boss of this story arc. Now, when it comes to the character of Black, there's obviously some controversy here because, well, he is black. This type of thing is not offensive to the Japanese, an already xenophobic culture, but take this outside of Japan and some people may find an issue with it. Unlike other Red Ribbon characters, he doesn't really resemble any actor or anything. Some have said that perhaps Toriyama modeled him after Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's character in Bruce Lee's Game of Death, a movie I mentioned earlier, the one that inspired Muscle Tower, but I don't really see much of a resemblance here. Black makes the mistake of trying to fight Goku hand to hand, but fails and thus has to climb into a red ribbon suit of armor known officially as a battle jacket. A battle jacket is a special armor that has numerous weapons of destruction built into it. If you've ever seen those old SF 3D models, that's where Toriyama got this idea from. Once Black is defeated by Goku, the Red Ribbon Army was finished. Or were they? Nope. There's still more story to come with Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super and more surprising reveals. But first, I need to briefly discuss some of the other Red Ribbon Army versions that we've seen throughout the years in Dragon Ball. There are a few other film portrayals of the Red Ribbon Army that differ from the anime and manga. Sometimes these were radical departures. The example of this is from the third Dragon Ball theatrical movie called Makafushigi Dai Boken, which translates to Mystical Grand Adventure. One thing you should be aware of is that the three movies from the 80s from the original Dragon Ball are a trilogy of films that fit into their own continuity, a separate canon, so to speak, a retelling and repurposing of characters from the manga. Interestingly enough, in this film, a number of characters are featured, but they are not a part of any Red Ribbon Army. Instead, they appear to serve the Mifan Empire, which only exists in this movie universe and isn't part of the main saga, anime, or manga alike. We see General Blue, Sergeant Metallic, and Tao Pai Pai appearing in this movie, with Tao being the lead villain. Blue is killed by Tao Pai Pai the same way he was before with his tongue, and Metallic gets decapitated by Goku. This is the only film where Tao Pai Pai can actually be considered a general, although he really isn't. But that's not all. Dragon Ball's 10th anniversary movie called The Path to Ultimate Strength, aka Path to Power, is yet another retelling of some of the key events of the manga's early arcs and was released in 1996. This movie exists as a standalone film and is not part of any prior continuity. It's just its own separate thing. In this film, the Red Ribbon Army are the primary antagonists once again. Because of the film's limited runtime, not every member of the army could appear, but they did cram some of the more important ones like Blue, Black, Violet, Red, Sergeant Metallic, and General White. Android 8 is also in this film and plays a much more pivotal role in this movie than before. Just like in the manga, when Black finds out what Red was really going to do with the Dragon Balls, he takes his place as commander and battles Goku with his battle jacket. During the battle, Android 8, who had become a benevolent good character, is killed, which triggers Goku to unleash a massive Kamehameha and destroys Commander Black, and at the end of the film, resurrects Android 8. The designs of the Red Ribbon Army members featured in this film differ from those found in the original manga. Now, what you may not know, though, is that series creator Akira Toriyama himself drew these alternate versions of these characters. This Dragon Ball movie was the last theatrical Dragon Ball film to be released until 2013's Battle of Gods, which kicked off the Dragon Ball Renaissance, and it was also the first movie in the Dragon Ball franchise to feature CG effects mixed with animations. Speaking of movies and CG effects, I think it's time to discuss the return of the Red Ribbon Army and Dragon Ball Super Hero. Before we discuss the events of Dragon Ball Super Super Hero, where Toriyama made the Red Ribbon Army the lead villains once again, we gotta briefly talk about the last time the army was resurrected, and that would be the Red Pants Army. No, I'm not making this up. The Red Pants Army is a new reincarnated Red Ribbon Army featured in the Asian exclusive MMORPG Dragon Ball Online. Now, the reason I'm even bringing this up is because Toriyama worked on Dragon Ball Online and thus added some of these ideas to the story. The Red Pants Army was formed by General Ban in age 991 with an intention to restore the anthropomorphic species to power. The other leader is a robotic clone of Commander Red known as Android 9, as well as many other artificial humans which are advanced versions of previous designs. I'll go into more detail on these in the Androids Explained video, but the reason I bring them up is because there's a lot of these tropes and ideas that were reused by Toriyama in the script for Dragon Ball Super Super Hero. So in 2022's Dragon Ball Super Super Hero, we find out that sometime after the fall of the Red Ribbon Army, some remnants of the group would continue in secret by hiding behind a front company known as Red Pharmaceuticals, owned by Commander Red's son, Magenta. Magenta's goal was to at some point strike back against those who destroyed the army, conquer Capsule Corporation, and defeat the aliens that are harbored there, our main characters. Magenta, alongside his assistant Carmine, have been spying on Goku and the others for many years. One interesting tidbit is that we see a photograph that Magenta has of Commander Red and Violet. Does this mean that Violet might actually be his mother? It's not stated, but it's definitely possible. In order to accomplish his goals, Magenta enlists the help of Dr. Hedo, a brilliant scientist with 2 PhDs, and the grandson of notable Red Ribbon scientist Dr. Garo, aka Jiro. More details on him in the next video. After being released from prison, Magenta manipulates Hedo by painting the picture that Capsule Corp is the evil company and Red Ribbon was benevolent. Hedo, looking for financial backing and a seemingly endless surplus of money, accepts the deal. Hedo designs brand new androids, more powerful than any before, as well as the secret super weapon known as Cell Max. At this point, the new Red Ribbon Army base is far more advanced than the one from the past and appears to be hidden in a volcano. The film borrows heavily from Marvel Comics' fictional nation of Wakanda, featuring camouflage technology to hide it from being seen by the naked eye unless you pass through its invisible barrier entryway. By this time, the Red Ribbon Army has abandoned all weapons from the past and is purely relying on Dr. Hedo's creations, Gamma 1 and Gamma 2, to do the fighting. No tanks or planes or boats or motor cars, not a single luxury. Yeah. And none of that's used. Although you do see classic Red Ribbon battle jackets in the film as well as firearms. By the end of the film, Magenta's killed by Dr. Hedo's Micro B robot Hachimaru after going mad and unleashing Cell Max on the world. Gamma 2 sacrifices himself in the battle, Cell Max is destroyed, and Gamma 1 and Dr. Hedo decide to reform their ways and work for Capsule Corporation. Although we don't see it on screen, we can assume the remaining Red Ribbon Army soldiers are either reformed to become good or arrested and the base is destroyed when Cell Max explodes. Will we ever see the Red Ribbon Army again? Time will tell. The events of World War II changed Japan forever, but ultimately I don't think Toriyama created the Red Ribbon Army as some sort of political statement where he frowns upon dictatorships or communism or even imperialism. When studying the history of Toriyama as a writer and artist, before and after Dragon Ball, you'll find that the man has a love of drawing vehicles. He absolutely loves doing it. This arc gave him a chance to do that. But oh no, we're not done. This is a lot, but there's a lot more to come. On the next edition of Dragon Ball In Depth, we continue the story of the Red Ribbon Army into Dragon Ball Z by putting focus on the artificial humans, aka the androids, and their creator, as the legacy of the Red Ribbon Army would continue to haunt Goku and his friends many years later. I want to give special thanks to the research done by the Tao of Dragon Ball's Derek Padula. Check out his book, specifically Dragon Ball Culture Volume 4, where a lot of this information is expounded upon by panel of the original manga. It's a great resource for all Dragon Ball fans. The next Dragon Ball In Depth will be Androids Explained. I'll catch you in that one. Take care.